There's a certain subset of the population that I think would be an exceptional real estate agent, which I don't think is represented at quite the level maybe they should be in the real estate world. But it's because I think that they possess what are some of the greatest advantages that could exist in the year 2024 and moving forward. So let's talk about it. My name is Jesse Lynch. I run multiple real estate teams around the United States, and this channel is about helping people who want to change the outcome of their life as a real estate agent, and specifically people who want to do things differently. So if that's you, come hang out for a while, hit the subscribe button, and check out jesselynch.co for different ways that we could work together. There's kind of a lot of different varieties of it. And if it's not you, keep it moving. There are other channels that are much more suited for people who want to do things kind of the old-fashioned way. The first job, and I think the most important job of a real estate agent, is marketing. And I think there are very few people on this whole planet that have more experience in marketing an idea and bringing it to life than the artist. While I think all artists have a leg up on the average new agent, that's not it. I'm not talking about the hobbyist working in the shadows who never really shows the world what they're up to. That's not gonna do it. I'm talking about the hustler. I'm talking about the person running the show, whether as a solo artist, a leader of a group, or one of a few main drivers of a group of artists. So the artist in general, creatives in general, visual artists, painters, drawers, photographers, right? Vloggers, YouTubers in general, graphic designers, musicians, bloggers, micro-influencers, stylists, models, podcasters, comedians. Am I missing anybody? I'm sure I am. There's so much variety to the artist, but again, I'm talking about the hustler. I'm talking about the person really getting after it. But I want to give a special nod to the starving artist, maybe even the starving artist musician, as that's something that I'm super familiar with. But the starving artist who has chosen to starve to accomplish something as wildly difficult as a successful career in art, and really the DIY artists. So why the artist? I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll talk about them. So for one, there's a very good chance that you've worked really hard on something for a very long time for very little money. And I think the opportunity of real estate rewards that level of dedication, rewards putting in the work, digging the ditch. And you've paid down the ignorance debt. That's kind of an Alex Hormozyism if you haven't heard it yet, but you've paid down the ignorance debt of how to create content, sure, how to random content, kind of the big C content, how to create platform accounts, something as simple as how to make an Instagram account, how to make and post something, how to share and upload content, right? How to ultimately post content, and a ton of intangibles that come along with being an artist. As simple as framing an image on a smartphone camera, right? Framing it, putting a filter on it, posting, putting a caption, thinking through all of those things as it relates to a product or a brand or a band or you as a solo entrepreneur artist. And so very basically, you are accustomed to releasing content into the world, releasing something you made and shaped and formed and releasing that into the world. You've created a brand on social media, whether you know it or not, whether you realize that what you're doing is creating a brand, and maybe even created several brands if you played in multiple bands, right? Or if you've done multiple graphic design companies or graphic design, attempts, right? Different, maybe I can do graphic design for bands, maybe I can do graphic design for businesses, maybe I can shoot photography, portraits, senior portraits, weddings, whatever, right? You have created multiple brands and tried to present them to the world, right? There's an ignorance debt that comes along with that. At the very start before you've ever done it, you're like, how on earth do I do this? And maybe you see other people doing that, right? That's fine. You can still witness other people releasing content and creating their own brand, but until you've done it yourself, it's not the same thing. And you've made content in a vacuum for nobody, and you kept trying. And ultimately, you've gotten an idea from nothing to something. You've truly created something new, even if it was not all that groundbreaking or whatever. Nonetheless, you took an idea, you took whatever an idea is, right? Whatever that thing, whatever that receptive thing is that is an idea, and you turned it into something somewhat tangible, even if only an online post. There's also a level of DIY-ness, organization, self-organization, self-promotion that exists in being an artist, being a freelance artist, being self-employed in the artist space, whatever you want to call it. And what I mean by all of that is that you've learned how to interact with people on a consumer and creator level. Hopefully you've started to figure out how to make that feel natural, or how it works for you and your brand, right? How to have a parasocial relationship with somebody. That's a very interesting thing. And it does exist in real estate if you're marketing in the way that I think is the best way to be marketing real estate. You've probably figured out the basics of networking, right? You've had to figure out, okay, I want to put on a show. Who do I need to know to put on a show? Who do I have to contact, right? Or you've probably said, how do I get on that show, right? Whether that's artist or musician, right? Basically, I want to be a part of something that somebody else is putting on. How do I do that? And how do I make connections that will support me in this endeavor, right? How do I find a manager? How do I find an agent or something like that? Or just how do I find peers who want to collaborate on things like this? And you've at least spent a lot of time trying to crack the code of how do I stand out in a crowded room? I think there are few rooms more crowded than real estate agents. There's so many real estate agents that I actually don't want to look up the number because I don't want it to screw with me, because I think there's plenty out there for me, but that number is insane, right? But it's a very crowded room. And so how do you stand out? You've already figured out how to position yourself in a completely different situation. And at the end of the day, marketing is standing out, right? Marketing is being the one noticeable thing in a room of 1,000 things that kind of look and sound and feel the same, right? That, to me, that is good marketing. It's being different. I say this all the time, but different is better than better. And if you've made headway at all in the art space, I think you've had to figure out at least one of two different things. One is either how can I be different and how can I present something different to the world that people latch onto? The other is, how do I network? How do I make friends? How do I allow people to bolster up something that may not be that wildly unique? How do I get people, whether that's my peers or the consumer or the fan or whatever you want to call it, how do I get them to bolster me up, to lift me up, and basically how to convince people or to network with people and how to be liked enough by people to help them propel your career or your endeavor or whatever you want to call it to another level. That's networking. And then there's also just the pure marketing, the how do I stand out. You can also combine the two of those, and I think that's a superpower, right? And so at the end of the day, the two most important pieces, in my opinion, are this. Number one, you've learned how to learn. You've had to problem solve wildly unique problems as an artist, for sure. If you've done anything, if you've gotten at all along the route, you have figured out how to get over weird hurdles, right? And real estate has an endless amount of bizarre problem solving, bizarre issues, things that come out of nowhere and you think, I've never seen this before. How would I possibly figure out how to do this? And my dad used to always say that school is not about learning the curriculum. It's learning how to learn. There's one thing that I've taken from him and carried with me my whole life. It is that you have to learn how to learn. And in my opinion, there's no better way to learn how to learn than to just start doing, right? There's no better way to learn how to do one thing than to learn how to do another thing. I think there's a proverb. I'm gonna say it wrong, but I'm riffing right now. But it's basically how one does one thing is how that person does everything. I know there's a much more slick way of saying it, but you learn how to do one thing, and how you do that, it will carry over into everything else that you do. So number one is you've learned how to learn. And number two is whether you think so or not, if you've released your art publicly, you've begun to harden your defenses, harden your shell against being judged by other people. I think fear of judgment is one of the biggest reasons that people don't start. Fear of being judged by their peers, by their family, by strangers, by eggs on the internet, right? I don't know if they still do eggs, whatever. But by basically made up people on the internet, that fear of being judged is enough to stop a lot of people from ever getting started. And so even if you're still very self-conscious or nervous every time you release something into the wild, right? You've done the hard part that so many real estate agents, so many business owners and wannabe entrepreneurs are too afraid to do, which is just pressing publish, pressing post, putting the thing out. I have a lot more on this, but that's another video.